Hello, this is Jasur Ikromov from Expert 19, and today we will overview the case study called Managers During Crisis, the case of a major French car manufacturer. So, the 2008 global economic crisis hit the world like a typhoon. It came suddenly and left much destruction in its wake, including waves of company closures, downsizing, wage cuts, and lingering high unemployment. The global automotive industry was hit particularly hard by this crisis. Interested in the various policies regarding the management of the crisis as well as the impact of the crisis on individuals, this research was conducted within one of the major French car makers called Happy Car. In autumn 2008, the company outlined a general plan for the voluntary departure of 4,000 employees in France by April 2009. With an additional 2,000 job cuts expected elsewhere in Europe. This measure was all the more significant given the company's strong tradition of employee loyalty since its creation at the end of the 19th century. More specifically, attention was focused on a diverse group of managers who went through the global downturn and decided to remain in their organization. The primary aim was to see how these managers weathered the storm of HR measures that were taken by their employer. In times of crisis, when organizations face slack, business, reengineering, restructuring, and downsizing appear as possible solutions to reduce costs while improving efficiency and sustainability efforts to meet production and performance goals. In downsizing process, all workers considered not equal, and in this consideration we can highlight the education status of workers and the ones who hold, for instance, managerial positions in the organization. One can notice, however, that there also exists a positive vision of downsizing, which relates it to the strategic purpose of corporate transformation. According to this view, the overall outcomes of downsizing should be positive if implemented in a strategic perspective aiming at corporate redesign and future growth. Downsizing should lead then to lower overhead costs, faster and smoother decision making, and an increase in productivity levels. From an organizational point of view, it is commonly believed that downsizing is a cost-cutting exercise that leads to increased workload and responsibilities for those who remain in the organization. Some studies have shown that downsizing doesn't always lead to increased performance. Crisis situations thus present a unique challenge for HR departments. When facing an economic turmoil, HR people face the downsizing dilemma. On the one hand, it is commonly argued that people are the first competitive advantage of an organization. On the other hand, employees are the ones who are most affected by downsizing measures. For many of those who remain in the organization, the professional landscape changed dramatically. Following the massive resignations, some employees have changed job titles and duties. Others have seen a majority of their team's labor force leave the company. These workers were thus the ones who were expected to make the company function and succeed with fewer staff. This impact can be explained through the psychological impact of downsizing on the ones who remain in the organization. This phenomenon, called the supervisor syndrome, is characterized by a low moral, a feeling of guilt, bitterness, withdrawal from organizational life, decrease in job involvement, anger, and frustration. On the one side, employees may have expectations regarding promotions or job security, for instance. On the other side, employers may expect the employee to be loyal, hardworking, and committed to his or her job. However, it sometimes happens that an employee's understanding of the employment relationship may be different from that held by the organization. Violation. Violation of the psychological contract happens when one party perceives that the other party has failed to uphold its obligations or promises. The cognitive aspect of violation results from a calculation of what the employee has received compared to what was promised. But violation is also accompanied by an emotional state consisting of anger, bitterness, and feeling of betrayal. These emotions are all the more experienced as people have the feeling that their organization has resorted to layoffs without clear reasons. Organizational justice. The key role of organizational justice is a variable moderating the negative impacts occurring when the psychological contract is breached. More specifically, the dimension relating to procedural justice appears to be at the heart of the psychological processes at stake in such situations. Procedural justice acknowledges the importance of the decision process itself. More specifically, negative outcomes are more likely to be accepted if the process is judged as fair. The analysis shows that the manager's reactions have evolved from a wait-and-see phase in time 1 to a temporary relief state at time 2, then to adapt phase in time 3, and a return to normal at time 4. Time 1. The first interview took place in January 2009. This was a time when people were invited to express their desire to quit Happy Car to take advantage of the special plan for voluntary departure. 3 different facets emerged from the analysis of the interviews. First, the respondents' reactions to the voluntary departure plan itself. Second, the expected consequences of the plan at the organizational level. And third, the personal feelings and opinions that are expressed regarding the implementation of the plan. A general concern was related to the fact that the best people would leave first and quickly. There was a double perception at that moment. First, the feeling that everything was going swiftly and that so many people were leaving that their departures could not be celebrated properly. Second, there was some real uncertainty about the final outcome of the policy. At time 1, the respondents mentioned some evolutions that were sometimes related to the departure plan. However, this policy was also seen as a signal of the capacity of the company to react to the situation, to take initiatives in difficult times. This generated some positive reactions from the managers we met. Most of them were still confident in the company. They still had trust. The voluntary departure plan was also seen as a real breaking off in the history of the psychological contract with Happy Car. Probably the most common feeling at time 1 was to wait and see. People were hesitating between the shock of this brutal violation of the tacit contract, the necessary tolerance for the decision of quitting, and the strong feeling that the company had to react swiftly and significantly in such a critical situation. Time 2. The interviews of time 2 were conducted right before the end of the voluntary departure plan. The common feeling at time 2 was a general acknowledgement that the departure plan had been a success. The target had been reached in terms of volume. People seemed to be pretty happy to benefit from this package to start a new life. Happy Car had made a significant step to weather the crisis at that point. The general feeling at that time was one of relief. On a personal level, the general feeling was one of relief because it had been less stressful and painful than expected. The success of the plan was seen as an opportunity to avoid layoffs for the survivors. So far, it had been conducted without financial and practical consequences for those who stayed. Survivors remained confident, and a few of them looked at the possible opportunities for their own career or job scope with the departure of so many people. People also mentioned that they felt the concrete consequences of the voluntary departure plan in their own job. In fact, reaching the target in volume was one thing. Managing the vacant slots that appeared in the organizations was another one. The resignation of so many people had been a shock. Everybody has questioned himself or herself about the decision to make at that point. Some had lost some confidence in their company. For some respondents, it had been an occasion of working on the improvement of the organization without pain. Of course, several people still mentioned that the good ones had left, but it was no longer a hot topic. This was expressed as a general statement more than as a real personal experience in one's own area. Times 3. At times 3, some people were still negotiating the possibility of leaving the company, but on a very small scale. A new HR measure had just been announced for September 2009, the implementation of a short-time working phase for almost all employees. This measure led the majority of Happy Car employees to work 4 days a week without any salary loss between September and December 2009. The day off was financed by the French state. Whereas people at times to expressed a feeling of relief, the interviews at times 3 revealed the doubts of respondents, namely because of the organizational difficulties resulting from the loss of thousands of employees. The voluntary departure plan was over. However, people were suffering from its aftermath. Out of the impact on the costs of the company, this recent move increased uncertainty and appeared as an additional reason for reorganizing the company again. Career opportunities blocked. At this stage, a few people considered the possible opportunities that departures were creating for those who stayed. Most of them were pessimistic. Potential opportunities didn't become a reality as they were hindered by internal stakes. The team leaders tried to keep their best talents. The opportunities that had emerged at the time too remained a dream for most of our respondents and undermined their trust toward Happy Car. Finally, at times 3, the tacit loyalty contract between Happy Car and its employees was more than ever breached. Loyalty towards Happy Car appeared as an outdated concept. The voluntary departure plan had fostered ambiguous feelings at this stage. People resented the departure of others, which was a disruption in the traditional employment for life culture of the company. Time 4. At time 4, the context of the company had changed. Everything was moving very fast in the company and people were more concerned about the new HR policy of part-time work for all without a loss in salary. This policy was a great change for this period. It radically changed the work situation of everybody in the company. First, respondents needed to adjust to this new HR measure against the crisis. The challenge was to be able to carry out one's work in 4 days instead of 5. The managers underlined the pressure they felt when facing this new pace of work. Days had become longer to take over the workload. The general atmosphere at work had also changed and had become more flexible. In other departments, people adapted to the new framework and didn't abide by the new rule of not working on Fridays. The theme relating to survival stood out at time 4. The respondents had the feeling of having passed the course. The situation is still evolving. We survived. Some things are going in the right direction. We have shown that we could survive, that we were able to change. But is it a sustainable change? That is the question. The general feeling at time 4 was one of uncertainty and fear for one's future. Discussion. The evolution of perception across these 4 periods that covered the year 2009 can be analyzed on organizational and personal levels. As it was explained earlier, the survey is not focused on voluntary departure plan itself. It is more interested in relating the plan to other issues that concern the people right in the middle of the crisis, at different times, and in relation to their professional situation, their personal life, their vision of the company, and of the global context. On the organizational level, the plan is associated with different perceptions, the departure of the more competent and experienced people, the ability of the company to react quickly to a difficult situation, the difficulties associated with reorganizing the company with less people, the potential opportunities for mobility thanks to the opening of positions due to the vacant jobs. On the individual level, and the feeling relating to the plan expresses the motivation of people, the emotions caused by farewell parties, the surprise of the quick success of the plan, the shock of so many people leaving the company given the employment for life culture in the company, the relief that people who leave appear to be happy about it, the questioning of one's decision, and the potential opportunities of vacant positions. In conclusion, this research has three major results. First of all, it shows the importance of looking at a phenomenon such as an economic crisis in real time, when policies are decided and implemented to snapshot the perceptions of the individuals when they don't yet have the knowledge of the end of the story. Second, it is interesting to decipher the perceptions related to a specific policy, the voluntary departure plan, in the context of a broader perspective by the respondents rather than the questioning direct the directions to the policy and its implementation. Third, it is important to highlight the evolution of these perceptions and to address the factors that may explain the evolution of perceptions by the respondents. That is the implementation of new HR policies like the 4 days working week and the clarification of the strategy of the company. This research also presented a couple of limitations. The first one was being restricted to a small sample, even though these people belong to a homogeneous group in the company. The second one was to address these reactions without taking into account variables such as the seniority in the company, the personal situation, or their geographic location, to name a few. Furthermore, the methodology could also be improved through multiple collecting data, such as observations on archival data to triangulate findings from diverse sources and increase the validity of our interpretations. This is the end of the presentation. Thanks for your attention. If you have questions, you can leave them in the comments below.